All right, it is time to start our second exercise. And you can see in PhotoBucket, I have 6 pages worth of past student examples. This is a fun project. And you start by picking some two-dimensional image that you like. You like it for its colors, you like it for its use of space, and its composition. So this is video game concept art that the student liked. And what our job is going to be is to recreate the composition using only shape tools in Photoshop. Basically, think of them as cutting out pieces of paper. Right? Here's Edvard Munch's painting, The Scream, with shape tools. Here's Adventure Time characters. Notice these don't need to be high-resolution images because we're going to be completely replacing them with our own shapes. Yeah, so they don't need to be complicated to work really well. Beauty and the Beast, so on and so on. Picasso, Frank Frazetta, Risque. We get a mature rating on this YouTube video. Van Gogh, Picture of a Flower, Something Weird, Andy Warhol, Polar Bear, on and on. So what you'll notice is even if the two-dimensional image you choose has a lot of texture and a lot of detail to it, like this painting of Joe Montana, to simplify its composition, you're going to look past a lot of that. So you're looking at its core elements. And this is kind of our introduction to vector tools, which is shape-based, not pixel-based. And even though we're going to use Photoshop to do it, when we actually design our own shapes, our own vectors, we'll use a program called Illustrator. So on and on. What you'll notice is all of these are done with just solid shapes, solid paper cutouts. And that's how you would start for sure. But then every once in a while, I'll show you how you can fill in a solid shape with a gradient and get a little bit more variation. And that can be nice. Some of you will spend way too long finding perfect shapes, and some of you will nail it with just a few. Right? So it's up to you. But the whole goal, some of you won't finish. The whole goal is to just get introduced to these techniques. So my past examples can be found here under Digital Art 1 instructor demonstrations. And this is where my past cartoon jumbles are as well. And I often like to use this artist that I just love, named James Jean, who's a traditional artist, who's a digital artist, who's an illustrator, and a gallery artist, just because his work's really clean, but it's also really complicated. And so these are all James Jean pieces, and these are my shape renditions of them, done as demos. And then this is my friend Edwin Yushiro, who's a digital artist. He shows in LA, but these are huge prints that he prints on like on silk, and then puts between plexiglass for his shows. So that's a big painting. It's like 60 inches by 40 inches. Another James Jean. This is from The Little Prince, a little claymation film still. So pick something you're interested in really examining. And I haven't really given it a lot of thought. And since James Jean is pretty complicated, let's see. Who else do I like? I really like this artist named Ellen McCollum. He's kind of a conceptual artist. See what images. And he deals a lot with shapes and kind of handmade, mass-produced things. But I need it to be two-dimensional, not sculptural. So maybe that's a little too minimal. Oh, but this one's kind of cool. Remember, it doesn't matter what size. So as I'm looking, I can right-click. And while I'm showing you Ellen McCollum, he did this project in Switzerland where in a whole town in Switzerland, they gave up their addresses. So they no longer had mailing addresses. And instead, he made a customized symbol for each address. but they were all organized around a set of principles so that the mail, the postmaster could know exactly what street, what area of town, based on which aspects of the shape were present. So yeah, these are addresses, if you know how to use them. And he made just, one for every house in the town. So thousands. But you can kind of see the power of shape that way, right? And this is how he shows them in a gallery. So each one is unique. But anyway, all right. So I kind of like this. This is weird. So this is a series of photos of like wax figurines. And these are good because they're strong colors, strong visuals. If you squint, you can see if the composition holds up with lights and darks. And this one I think holds up rather well. So I think I'm going to do that. And I'm doing a lot of portraits lately, so maybe understanding this will help me with my work. Once you have something selected, save it to the desktop. You don't need to rename it. You don't need to worry about its resolution as long as you can see it clearly. Okay, now to do the project, we are going to open that photo in Photoshop. So this is different than we've done before. Before, we've always brought reference into Photoshop. So to open it in Photoshop, you just right-click and you say Open with Photoshop. Now, we're going to get acquainted with the image. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to image size. Because even though the image might not be large enough resolution, we need to make it large enough resolution to print. So what we do is we go to image size. We'll see its width. We'll see its height in inches. And we'll see its resolution. That's how many pixels fit in each inch. Now we know for this lab, what's the standard resolution we use for this lab. It's more than 72, which is screen resolution. 300 is professional standard for printing. But this is our lab. This is Studio 205. So we go 350. Just in case, when you get to print, you just want it a little bit larger, we go to 350. And then what's the default size we're going to use? You go to image, you're in Photoshop, you go to image, and then image size. So it was 11 by 14, right? But the reason we brought the photo in is because your images are going to be different proportions. So this is not going to be exactly 11 by 14. This is 8.125 by 12.181. That's a weird size. So I need it to be at least 11 by 14. So what I do is I'm going to find the limiting scale. And I believe the limiting scale is going to be its width. Bless you. So if I make its width 11, then I just make sure that its height is at least 14, and it is. And notice I have this little chain link connected. You want to click on it so it is. That chain link will make the proportions match. Otherwise, you're going to be stretching it out. And in order to do this, to be able to make it 11 by 16 inches or whatever yours is going to be, has to be at least 11 by 14 by at least 350 pixels per inch. I need to have the resample box checked. Now this is not a good idea generally. Because what this is going to do by saying resample is it's going to make the computer make up pixels. So for every pixel that's in this image, I'm asking the computer to make up like 100 or more new pixels around that original pixel. Think of it as ripples in the water. So what is it going to do to the image? It's going to make it softer. Right? So if I zoom in, it made it way bigger, but look how these are the pixels. I've lost a lot of hard edges, and now it's all really soft. That's okay. I can still see what's going on. Yeah, so let's go through that again. So you go to image size. You want to have the chain clicked so that it has those little bars, and that will lock the proportions. Then you want to make sure resample is checked. And if you have resample check, that lets you change the actual pixels. Okay. If I don't have resample checked, then watch, I can put in like 3 inches wide, and all of a sudden it's 4 inches, 0.4 tall, but look what happened to the resolution. Now it's 1,283 1/3 pixels per inch, which is way higher than I needed. So instead, if I say resample, it allows me to put in my own value. So what did I say? I said 11 inches wide, and that gets me back to 350.
Why did it go over the height?
Yeah, so if your height, when you put in 11 for the width, let's say, and your height doesn't go to 14, then your height is the limiting factor. So go ahead and type 14 for the height, and then your width will go beyond 11. Does that make sense? As long as it's at least 11 by 14 at 350. So you don't want it to be below 11, and you don't want it to be below 14, but above is okay. And at 350. So does that mean that if I print this now, it will print at high quality because it's 350 pixels per inch at 11 by 14 inches? I mean, it will print, but the thing is the image isn't high quality because I made the computer make up so many pixels, right? This would be really blurry. This is like taking an image off from online and forcing it to be really big, because that's exactly what we just did. But that's not an issue for us for this project because we're going to be making our own shapes at this high resolution on top of this reference and not using any of these pixels by the end. So how do we do that? All right, so last exercise we played with transforming. We're going to still do that. This time, though, we're not going to bring in new images. We're going to create our own images using shape tools. So down by the hand, right above the hand is a little rectangle. This is a shape tool. And if you drop down the drawer, you'll see there's a rounded rectangle tool, an ellipse tool, a polygon tool, which can also be a triangle, can be any shape sides you want. You have to say how many sides. We're not going to use the line tool. And then a custom shape tool, right? Which can do things like hearts and flowers. But I really like this custom shape, which looks like a weird soft star, because it's actually very handy. Okay, now we're going to do the basic shapes. We're going to try to fill it in. So what kind of shape, if I squint, do I recognize really large in this? Well, I recognize a lot of ovals, right? Maybe this big circular oval right here. So let's put that in. So I'm going to choose the ellipse tool, and I'm just going to click and drag a big oval. And then I'm going to use the move tool and kind of move it into place. And if I want to shape it or size it, I can say Command T and transform it. And then this is what's cool about the shape tool. Notice I didn't make a new layer, but it automatically made a shape layer for me. So it's like a smart layer. It has special features. Notice it has that little thing in the corner. But what's nice about that is if I double click on it, I can still get layer styles, but the even easier way is if I just click on it, I get the properties. And that allows me to change the color. So I can change its color in multiple ways. And if I click on the color selector, I can even steal the color right from my photo. So if I want it to be like that yellow, you see, then it will change it to that yellow. Now let me try to get the face. I'm going to use a rounded rectangle for the face. And notice I want generic, kind of bigger than they need to be, shapes. And I can use the move tool to move them around. I can use the transform tool to edit them. And as a rounded rectangle, in the properties, I can decide how rounded I want it to be. Right now, it's very subtly rounded for such a high resolution image. It's only rounded 10 pixels. So I can make that, 80 pixels. On all the edges, so that it's much more rounded, like that. And then I can change the color by clicking on the color selector.